Graphing a line in slope-intercept form is probably, in my opinion at least, the easiest way to graph a line. Slope-intercept form means that y is by itself, and then we have mx plus b. The m stands for the slope, so our coefficient of x will always be the slope, the rise over run of the line. The b value, the constant, will always be the y-intercept, where the graph crosses the y, or the vertical axis. So let's take a look at how to graph these by hand, and then I'll show you how to enter these in your graphing calculators as well, if you'd like to check your solutions that way. So down here we have two lines. The first line is already solved for y. It's in slope-intercept form, meaning I can look at this and tell that the 2 is going to be the slope. And if it helps you, let's write that as 2 over 1 so we can see the rise over the run. And then the y-intercept is going to be -1, where it crosses the y-axis. Well, here's the trick that I use to remember. Since slope stands for m, and y-intercept stands for b, which really make no sense. Here's what I tell people. The b really is for begin. So it tells you where your graph is going to begin from. So on the y-axis, count down 1 and put a point. That's where your your line begins from. The m for slope, I tell people, really stands for move. So where you're going to move to from where you began to find all your other points. So with a slope of, what did we say, +2, I'm going to count up to I'm going to show that, and then count over 1 and put a point. I'm going to erase those other lines I drew in there so you don't see them. So up to over 1 and put a point. And then do that again. Count up to over 1, put a point. It's not let me make points. Count up to and over 1 and make a point. And you can keep doing that as much as you want to. You could also count down to, but just make sure your run is -1. And you can continue finding points in that way, in that direction. If you think about why that's allowed, think about -2 over -1, and what would that simplify to? Well, just a +2 over 1, so it's the same slope. Now, a couple things about graphing lines. Please use a ruler or edge of a calculator, edge of a book or something to make that line as straight as possible. And don't just connect the points, but make that line go all the way through your graph. And I'm going to break my own rules since I don't have a ruler I can use right here. I'm going to freehand the line. But do better than I do. It's not too bad, I suppose. But do better than I do, make that line as straight as possible. So there is the graph of that line. Let me switch colors and let's graph one more. Then I'll show you the way to do these on the calculator. So line 2 is down here. Now it's not solved for y. Y is not by itself. It's -5 times y. So first step is I need to get this in slope-intercept form by dividing both sides by -5. That gets me an equation of y equals. I'm going to do the negative sign on top, although the negative sign can really be anywhere in the fraction, top or bottom, or in the middle, as long as only one of those numbers is negative. And I'm going to put the x on the side so I can see the slope. Well, that -4/5, that coefficient of x, is the slope, so that's my m value. My b value, well, there isn't one there, so I suppose it's got to be 0 in this case. My line is going to go through the origin, so remember, the trick that I use, the b stands for begin, so let's begin from the origin and put a point right there. Now I have a slope of -4/5, and I put that negative on top, which means my rise is really a -4, so I'm going to count down 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then +5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which leaves me a point over here. I can do that again, count down 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then forward 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and just fit on the graph over there. But I'm on a space, so suppose I want to count the other direction. I can do this as +4 over -5. As long as one of your directions is negative, your line is fine. So from where I began, that origin, I'll count up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But since that was a positive, this direction, my run will be negative. So count to the left 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and put a point. Give me at least 3 points, more if you want to do more. Again, use a ruler. I'm going to break my own rule and just freehand it. But use a ruler, edge of a calculator, make that line as straight as possible. Don't just connect the dots, but make the line go all the way through the graph, add some arrows, and there is a graph of that equation. Let's go ahead and take a look at how the calculator works. I'll show you a couple things with that right now. All right, let's take a look at how to use our graphing calculator to graph those lines we just looked at. So from your home screen, what we want to do is find the y equals key. So it's up here in the upper left. So press y equals. And you should see this screen pop up. Now, if there's anything in there, clear it out. If you see plot 1, plot 2, or plot 3 highlighted, like there's a black box around them, move up to there with your arrow keys and press enter to unhighlight those. You don't want those highlighted. So our first equation was y equals 2x minus 1. So your x variable button is right here. It's next to alpha, so use that for variables. So 2x and then minus 1. Before I hit graph, one thing I want to show you too, press the zoom button. The zoom button will sort of set up the window, which is what we see on the graph, like how much we see. And a good way to start is with zoom 6. So either arrow down to 6 or just press 6. And what that'll do is give you a nice 10 by 10 window, so 10 spaces to the left, up, down, left, and right. So we get a graph that looks like that, and we can see that, yeah, that looks like what we graphed. If you want to find points, a really cool thing about your calculator, press second, and then press graph to access the table. And what you'll see is if you scroll up and down, all the points you could want to ever see on that line. So a great way to check if you graphed your line right or plot points, or when things get more complicated, like things that aren't lines, we can look in the table to see these as well. Okay, let's go ahead and graph the second line as well, just to see that. I'll leave the first one in, I suppose. I'm gonna go down to y2 and enter in. Now notice we can't type in the original. It's y equals because we need to type in equations in slope-intercept form. So we had an equation of negative 4, I'll use just the division for negative 4/5, and then times x. And we didn't have a b value, it was 0, so just negative 4/5 x. I'll hit graph, and I'll see that line pop up as well, which again looks like what we did. So just some basics with our graphing calculator, but there you go. There's a couple lines using the graphing calculator.